In a small, peaceful town surrounded by lush green fields and winding roads, there lived a man named James Carter. He wasn't just any ordinary man. He was a police officer known for his dedication and bravery. But what truly set him apart was his partner, Max. Max wasn't human. He was a German shepherd with sleek black and tan fur, intelligent amber eyes, and an uncanny ability to sense danger before anyone else could. James and Max had been together for 6 long years. They weren't just colleagues. They were family. Every morning, James would wake up early, grab his uniform, and whistle for Max. The dog would come bounding into the room, tail wagging so hard it seemed like it might fly off. Together, they'd head to the station, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their days were filled with excitement and unpredictability. Whether it was chasing down suspects, sniffing out hidden drugs, or comforting frightened children during emergencies, Max was always by James's side. His sharp nose and quick reflexes saved countless lives, while his loyalty gave James the strength to keep going even on the toughest days. People in the town admired their bond. Kids loved petting Max when he accompanied James on school visits, and neighbors often stopped to chat about how amazing the duo was. "You two are unstoppable," one elderly woman once said, patting Max gently on the head. James smiled proudly, but knew deep down that much of their success was thanks to Max's instincts and courage. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. One crisp autumn morning, James walked into the station feeling unusually uneasy. Something felt off. As he approached the chief's office, his heart sank. The door was slightly ajar, and he overheard snippets of a conversation inside. Words like budget cuts and K-9 unit floated through the air, making his stomach churn. Summoning his courage, James knocked and stepped inside. The chief looked up, his expression heavy with regret. "James," he began slowly, "I'm sorry, but we've got no choice. We can't afford to keep the K-9 program running anymore." The words hit James like a punch to the gut. No more K-9 unit. That meant no more Max, at least not here. Max would be reassigned to another precinct far away, somewhere James couldn't easily visit. His mind raced as he tried to process the news. How could this happen? After everything they'd done for the town, how could they just take Max away? Later that day, James sat alone in the parking lot with Max lying quietly beside him. He stared at his faithful companion, memorizing every detail, the softness of his fur, the way his ears twitched when a car passed by, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Tears welled up in James's eyes as he whispered, "This might be our last ride together." Max tilted his head, looking up at James with those soulful eyes. It was almost as if he understood. For the first time in years, James felt utterly lost. Little did he know, this heartbreaking goodbye was only the beginning of a story that would test their bond, and ultimately prove just how unbreakable it truly was. The day of Max's departure arrived far too quickly. It was a gray, overcast morning, the kind that matched the heavy mood hanging in the air. James woke up earlier than usual, his heart pounding with dread. He knew today was the day he'd have to say goodbye to his best friend, and no amount of preparation could make it easier. He got dressed quietly, trying to steady his breathing, but his hands trembled as he reached for Max's leash. When Max saw the leash, his tail wagged excitedly, just like it always did. He didn't know what was coming. He thought they were heading out for another adventure together. James knelt down beside him, running his fingers through Max's thick fur one last time. "Hey, buddy," he whispered hoarsely, blinking back tears. Max looked up at him with those big amber eyes, tilting his head as if asking, "What's wrong?" James couldn't bring himself to explain. Instead, he stood up and clipped the leash onto Max's collar. As they walked toward the station, the streets felt eerily quiet, as though the entire town knew something monumental was about to happen. Normally, their walks were filled with energy, Max sniffing every tree, James greeting neighbors with a smile. But today, the atmosphere was somber. Even Max seemed to sense the change. His usual bounce was replaced by cautious steps. His ears perked up more than usual. At the station, a small gathering had formed to honor Max's service. Officers lined up outside, some holding their hats in respect, others whispering words of gratitude. There was a table set up with photos of Max in action, chasing suspects, standing proudly next to James, even posing with kids during community events. A banner read, "Thank you, Max." But despite the warm tributes, James couldn't focus on any of it. His chest tightened with every passing moment, knowing this celebration marked the end of their partnership. When it came time for speeches, James stepped forward, his throat dry and his voice shaky. He wanted to speak, to tell everyone how much Max meant to him, but the words wouldn't come. All he could manage was a soft, choked "thank you" before stepping back, unable to continue. The lump in his throat grew bigger as he watched Max being led toward the transport van that would take him away. Max hesitated at first, glancing back at James with confusion in his eyes. Why wasn't James coming with him? As the van door closed, sealing Max inside, James felt like a part of him was being ripped away. He stood there long after the vehicle disappeared down the road, staring at the empty space where it had been. His colleagues tried to console him, patting him on the shoulder and offering kind words, but nothing could ease the ache in his heart. For days afterward, James wandered around in a fog. Patrols felt hollow without Max trotting beside him. Meals tasted bland, conversations lacked meaning, and sleep eluded him. At home, the silence was deafening. Max's food bowls sat untouched in the corner. His favorite chew toy lay abandoned under the couch. Every little thing reminded James of him. The creak of the floorboards where Max used to wait for him, the faint smell of dog shampoo lingering in the air. But while James struggled to adjust to life without Max, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Deep down, he clung to the hope that somehow, someday, their paths would cross again. What he didn't realize yet was that Max wasn't ready to let go either. And soon enough, fate would step in to reunite them in ways neither of them could have imagined. Weeks turned into months, and life without Max became a painful routine for James. The house felt eerily quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against his ears and made everything seem heavier. Every morning, he woke up expecting to hear the familiar thud of Max's paws padding across the floor or the excited whine that always greeted him when it was time for their walk. But instead, there was only emptiness. At work, things weren't much better. Patrols that used to feel purposeful now dragged on endlessly. Without Max by his side, James felt exposed, like he was missing his other half. He tried to distract himself by volunteering for extra shifts, hoping the long hours would dull the ache in his chest. It didn't work. Even during busy nights, his mind kept wandering back to memories of Max, the way he barked playfully during training exercises, how he'd nuzzled James's hand when he was tired, the comforting weight of his head resting on James's lap after a tough day. James wasn't the only one struggling. Back at the new precinct where Max had been reassigned, life was different for him too. His new handler, Officer Sarah Collins, was kind and patient, doing her best to build a bond with the dog. She took him on walks, trained with him, and even brought him treats to win him over. But no matter how hard she tried, Max seemed distant, almost withdrawn. He followed commands and did his job well, but something was missing. Sarah noticed little things about Max, how he often paused mid-patrol to stare off into the distance, as if searching for someone who wasn't there. How he'd perk up at the sound of a car engine, only to slump back down when it drove past. And most of all, how his tail rarely wagged with the same enthusiasm it once had. "He misses you," Sarah murmured to herself one evening as she watched Max lying quietly in his kennel, gazing out the window. She didn't know James personally, but she could see the shadow of their connection in Max's eyes. Meanwhile, James threw himself into work, trying to fill the void left by Max's absence. But even the busiest days couldn't keep his mind from drifting. Late at night, He'd sit alone in his living room, flipping through old photos of them together. There was one of Max as a young pup, awkwardly climbing into the patrol car for the first time. Another showed the two of them standing proudly after solving a major case. Each picture tugged at his heartstrings, reminding him of how much they'd shared and how much he'd lost. One particularly lonely evening, James decided to take a drive. He found himself cruising aimlessly through the town, retracing routes he and Max used to patrol together. As he passed familiar streets and landmarks, memories flooded back. The laughter, the teamwork, the moments of triumph. For a brief second, he imagined Max sitting beside him in the passenger seat, ears perked up, tongue lolling out in a happy grin. But when he glanced over, the seat was empty, and reality came crashing back. What James didn't realize was that while he was mourning the loss of their partnership, Max was quietly proving just how irreplaceable he truly was. In his new precinct, Max's instincts remained razor-sharp. During routine patrols, he began showing signs of agitation near certain buildings, sniffing intently and growling softly under his breath. At first, Sarah dismissed it as curiosity or overzealousness, but Max persisted, refusing to leave those spots until she investigated further. One chilly night, Max's behavior took an unexpected turn. While accompanying officers on a stakeout, he suddenly bolted toward a dark alleyway, ignoring Sarah's calls to stop. Puzzled and slightly worried, she chased after him, flashlight in hand. When she finally caught up, she found Max standing rigidly in front of a dumpster, barking furiously. Curious, she shone her light inside and froze. Hidden beneath layers of trash were tools, gloves, and other items linked to recent burglaries plaguing the area. Sarah called it in immediately, realizing Max had uncovered something significant. News of his discovery spread quickly, catching the attention of nearby departments, including James. What neither James nor Max knew yet was that this breakthrough would set off a chain of events, bringing them closer than ever to reuniting. Though miles apart, their bond remained unshaken, waiting for the moment when fate would bring them back together again. Back in James's hometown, life had taken a darker turn. A string of burglaries had left the community on edge, and fear was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. Homes were broken into, businesses ransacked, and valuable items stolen, all without a trace of the culprits. The police department worked tirelessly to solve the mystery, but every lead seemed to hit a dead end. It was as if the criminals knew exactly how to cover their tracks. James felt the pressure more than anyone else. Not only was he responsible for keeping the town safe, but he also couldn't shake the feeling that something about these crimes felt personal. He spent hours poring over case files late into the night, searching for patterns or connections that others might have missed. At first glance, the burglaries appeared random, different neighborhoods, different times of day. But James's instincts told him otherwise. One evening, while reviewing maps of the affected areas, something caught his eye. He spread the documents across his kitchen table, circling locations with a red marker. As he stepped back to look at the bigger picture, a chill ran down his spine. Each site bore an uncanny resemblance to places he and Max used to patrol together. The similarities were subtle: a corner store they frequented, a park where they trained, even a quiet residential street where Max once chased down a suspect. But they were undeniable. James's heart raced as a theory began forming in his mind. What if these weren't random crimes? What if someone from their past, a criminal they'd put behind bars or a rival gang member, was targeting areas significant to their partnership? The thought made him uneasy. If he was right, this wasn't just about stealing property. It was about sending a message. And if that was the case, things could escalate quickly. The next morning, James brought his findings to the chief. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the map. "These aren't random spots. They're places Max and I patrolled regularly. Whoever's doing this knows us, or at least knows our history." The chief frowned, studying the evidence carefully. While he appreciated James's dedication, He reminded him not to jump to conclusions. Still, the pattern was hard to ignore, and the department agreed to step up patrols in those areas. As the investigation continued, James found himself haunted by memories of Max. He imagined what his partner would do in this situation, how he'd sniff out clues, track scents, and stay one step ahead of danger. Without Max's sharp senses, James felt like he was fighting blindfolded. Every patrol felt incomplete, every strategy lacking. He missed having something he could trust completely. What James didn't know was that Max was already making waves in his own precinct. News of his discovery near the dumpster had reached the ears of investigators, including those working on the burglary case. Officers began connecting the dots between the stolen goods found in the trash and similar items reported missing in James's town. Could the two cases be linked? Was there a larger operation at play? Meanwhile, Sarah noticed a change in Max's behavior. Since uncovering the evidence, he seemed more alert, almost restless. During patrols, he'd stop abruptly, sniffing the air or staring intently at certain buildings. At first, she chalked it up to coincidence, but when Max started acting strangely near the same types of structures targeted in James's town, she couldn't ignore it anymore. There was something Max was picking up on, something human eyes and instincts alone couldn't detect. Unbeknownst to either James or Max, their paths were beginning to converge. While James wrestled with frustration and unanswered questions, Max was quietly proving why he was such an invaluable asset. His actions were setting off alarms, drawing attention to details no one else had noticed. Though separated by distance, their shared purpose was pulling them closer together, inch by inch. For now, James remained unaware of Max's contributions, but soon enough, the pieces of the puzzle would fall into place, leading to a revelation neither of them could have anticipated. Little did James know, the bond he thought was fractured was about to become stronger than ever, and the answers he desperately sought lay within reach, thanks to the one partner who never stopped believing in him. In the neighboring precinct, Max's actions were causing ripples that no one had expected. His newfound handler, Sarah, was beginning to notice just how extraordinary he truly was. During routine patrols, Max would suddenly stop in his tracks, sniffing the air with intense focus or growling softly at buildings that seemed ordinary to everyone else. At first, Sarah thought it was just curiosity, or maybe a lingering habit from his old partnership with James. But as time went on, she realized there was something deeper going on. One chilly evening, Max's behavior took an unexpected turn. The teen was conducting a stakeout near an abandoned warehouse, a location suspected of being used by criminals for storage. Everything seemed quiet, almost too quiet. Officers huddled behind their vehicles, scanning the area with flashlights and binoculars. Max sat calmly beside Sarah, his ears twitching as he listened to every sound around them. Then, without warning, he bolted. "Max, wait," Sarah called out, scrambling to her feet. But Max didn't listen. He sprinted toward a narrow alleyway between two crumbling buildings, disappearing into the shadows before anyone could catch up. Sarah's heart raced as she followed him, unsure of what she'd find. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing trash bins, broken crates, and graffiti-covered walls. And then she saw him, standing rigidly in front of a dumpster, barking furiously. Sarah approached cautiously, shining her light inside the rusted metal container. What she found made her gasp. Hidden beneath layers of garbage were tools, gloves, and even a few stolen electronics, items that matched descriptions of property reported missing in recent burglaries. "This is it," she whispered, pulling out her radio to call for backup. Within minutes, officers swarmed the scene, documenting the evidence and securing the area. News of Max's discovery spread quickly, reaching investigators across departments, including James. When James heard about it, his jaw dropped. It wasn't just the fact that Max had uncovered crucial evidence. It was where it had been found. The alleyway connected directly to neighborhoods targeted in their own burglary spree. Could this mean the crimes were linked? Was there a larger network operating across multiple towns? Determined to get answers, James requested permission to collaborate with Max's new precinct. "If anyone can help us crack this case, it's Max," he argued passionately during a meeting with his superiors. After some deliberation, they agreed to reach out to the neighboring department. To everyone's relief, Sarah and her team welcomed the joint effort, recognizing the value of combining resources. When James arrived at the neighboring precinct to discuss strategy, his heart skipped a beat. There, standing proudly beside Sarah, was Max. For a moment, James froze, unable to believe his eyes. Then, as if sensing his presence, Max turned his head and locked eyes with James. Without hesitation, he broke free from Sarah's side and ran straight toward James, leaping into his arms with uncontainable joy. His tail wagged so hard it seemed like it might fly off, and his whole body vibrated with excitement. Tears welled up in James's eyes as he hugged Max tightly, burying his face in the dog's thick fur. "I missed you, buddy," he murmured, his voice cracking with emotion. Max responded by licking his face, whining softly as if to say, "I missed you too." The reunion was electric, drawing smiles from everyone present. Even Sarah couldn't help but feel moved by the depth of their bond. As they stood there together, James realized something. Max hadn't forgotten him, not for a single second. Despite the distance and time apart, their connection remained as strong as ever. And now, reunited under these circumstances, they had a chance to work together again, not just to solve a case, but to prove just how powerful their partnership truly was. With renewed determination, James and Max prepared to tackle the investigation head-on. This time, though, they wouldn't be alone. With Sarah and her team supporting them, they set out to uncover the truth behind the burglaries and to ensure that justice was served. For James, it felt like coming home. For Max, it was a chance to do what he did best: protect, serve, and stand by the man who meant everything to him. With James and Max reunited, the investigation took on a new energy. The duo quickly fell back into their old rhythm, as if no time had passed at all. James marveled at how seamlessly they worked together, how Max seemed to anticipate his every move, just like before. For Max, it was more than duty, it was joy. His tail wagged constantly, his eyes sparkled with purpose, and his movements were sharp and confident. Together, they became an unstoppable force. The first step was piecing together the evidence Max had uncovered. Officers from both precincts gathered in a conference room filled with maps, photographs, and reports. James stood at the front, pointing out connections between the stolen goods found near the dumpster and items reported missing in his town. "These aren't isolated incidents," he explained. "This is part of something bigger, a network moving stolen property across state lines." Max sat quietly beside James, watching intently as people talked. Occasionally, he'd perk up his ears or let out a soft whine, drawing attention to certain details. When someone mentioned a specific location tied to the burglaries, Max's reaction was immediate. He stood up, sniffed the air, and looked directly at James. "What is it, boy?" James asked, kneeling down to meet his gaze. Max nudged him toward the map, his nose brushing against a particular spot marked in red. James's eyes widened. "Wait a second," he said, tracing the area with his finger. "This matches one of the places we patrol together. And look, it connects to several other sites targeted in this case." Everyone in the room leaned in closer, intrigued by Max's instincts. It was clear that his sharp senses weren't just helpful, they were essential. Over the next few days, James and Max worked tirelessly, following leads and tracking scents that others couldn't detect. During one patrol, Max led them to an abandoned garage where tools matching descriptions of stolen items were hidden beneath piles of old tires. Another time, he alerted them to a suspicious vehicle parked outside a convenience store. Inside, officers discovered bags full of electronics linked to recent break-ins. But not every moment was smooth sailing. One tense evening, while investigating a lead in a dimly lit alley, James and Max found themselves face to face with danger. As they approached a shadowy figure rummaging through a pile of boxes, Max growled low in his throat, a warning signal James knew all too well. Suddenly, two more figures emerged from the darkness, blocking their exit. James's heart pounded as he reached for his radio, but before he could call for backup, Max sprang into action. With lightning speed, he lunged at one of the suspects, barking fiercely and forcing them to retreat. The distraction gave James enough time to subdue the others until reinforcements arrived. Afterward, as they stood catching their breath, James looked down at Max, with gratitude shining in his eyes. "You saved us again, buddy," he said softly, scratching behind Max's ears. Max responded with a proud bark, wagging his tail as if to say, "That's what I'm here for." As the pieces of the puzzle came together, the scope of the operation became clearer. The burglaries weren't random acts of theft. They were part of a larger criminal enterprise funding illegal activities across multiple states. Every clue Max uncovered brought them closer to dismantling the network once and for all. And with each victory, James felt a renewed sense of pride, not just in himself, but in the incredible dog who never stopped believing in him. Their teamwork inspired everyone around them. Officers from both precincts began referring to James and Max as the Dream Team, marveling at how effortlessly they communicated without words. Even Sarah, who had grown close to Max during their time together, admitted she'd never seen anything like it. "He's happiest when he's with you," she told James one day. "It's like he knows exactly where he belongs." By the end of the week, they had gathered enough evidence to identify the ringleader of the operation, a man with ties to organized crime. With Max leading the way, they tracked him down to a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town. The final confrontation was intense, but thanks to Max's alertness and James's quick thinking, they apprehended the suspect without incident. As the dust settled and the criminals were taken into custody, James realized something profound. Their bond wasn't just about loyalty or partnership, it was about trust. No matter how far apart life had pulled them, James and Max had always trusted each other to find their way back. And now, standing side by side amidst cheers and applause, they proved that some connections are unbreakable, even against the toughest odds. The success of James and Max's investigation sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting how a police dog had played a pivotal role in cracking a major criminal operation. Headlines praised Max as a four-legged hero, while interviews with officers emphasized the irreplaceable value of K-9 units in law enforcement. For James, it was more than just vindication. It was proof that their partnership wasn't something the department, or the town, could afford to lose. Inspired by the case's resolution, public support for reinstating the K-9 program surged. Residents organized fundraisers, local businesses donated supplies, and even children wrote letters to the mayor pleading for Max's return. One little girl's note read, "Please bring Max back, because he keeps us safe and makes people happy." It was impossible not to feel moved by such heartfelt appeals. James seized the opportunity to advocate for the program's revival. He presented his superiors with evidence of its impact. Crime rates had dropped significantly during patrols involving Max, and the recent case proved just how effective K-9 units could be. "Max isn't just a dog. He's part of our team," James argued passionately during a meeting. "He saved lives, solved cases, and brought justice to this town. How can we turn our backs on that?" His words struck a chord. The department agreed to reinstate the K-9 unit permanently, securing additional funding to ensure its sustainability. When the announcement was made, cheers erupted among officers, and James felt a weight lift off his shoulders. But the best part, Max would officially remain by his side, not as a temporary loan, but as a permanent partner once again. With the program restored, James and Max wasted no time getting back to work. They resumed their daily patrols, greeted warmly by townsfolk who treated them like celebrities. Kids ran up to pet Max, neighbors waved enthusiastically, and shopkeepers slipped treats into James's hands for the big guy. Everywhere they went, their presence brought comfort and reassurance. Crime rates continued to decline, and the sense of safety in the community grew stronger than ever. But the changes didn't stop there. Inspired by their story, neighboring departments began reevaluating their own K-9 programs, recognizing the importance of investing in these invaluable partnerships. Training workshops were organized, equipment upgrades were funded, and new recruits learned firsthand why dogs like Max were so crucial to modern policing. Sarah, Max's former handler, became one of the program's strongest advocates, sharing her experiences to inspire others. For James and Max, life returned to what felt like its natural rhythm, but better. Their bond, tested by separation and strengthened by adversity, was now unshakable. Patrols felt lighter, filled with laughter and playful nudges from Max whenever James lingered too long at a stoplight. Evenings at home were cozy again, with Max curled up at James's feet as they watched TV or relaxed after a long day. One evening, as they sat together under the stars in their backyard, James scratched behind Max's ears thoughtfully. "You know, buddy," he said softly, "we've been through a lot, but I think we're stronger now than we've ever been." Max tilted his head, gazing up at James with those soulful amber eyes, before resting his chin on James's knee. It was his way of agreeing, of saying, "We'll always have each other's backs." Their journey hadn't been easy, but every challenge they faced only deepened their connection. From heartbreak to triumph, they had proven that loyalty, trust, and teamwork could overcome anything. And as they looked toward the future, James knew one thing for certain. No matter what came their way, he and Max would face it together, as partners, as family, and as heroes who had changed their town forever. Though the scars of their separation still lingered, they served as reminders of how far they'd come, and how much they meant to each other. For James, Max wasn't just a dog. He was a symbol of hope, resilience, and unconditional love. And for Max, James wasn't just a handler, he was home. Life settled into a new rhythm for James and Max, one that felt fuller and brighter than ever before. The town buzzed with renewed energy, thanks in large part to the pair's return to their rightful place at the heart of the community. People often stopped James on his patrols just to thank him. And of course, to give Max an affectionate pat or a sneaky treat. "He's our guardian angel," one elderly woman said, smiling as Max wagged his tail and leaned into her hand. James chuckled, knowing she wasn't far off. Their days were busy but fulfilling. With the K-9 program reinstated, James took on a leadership role, training new handlers and helping select dogs who showed potential for the demanding yet rewarding work. Max became something of a mentor himself, demonstrating skills during training sessions that left rookies in awe. His keen sense of smell, lightning-fast reflexes, and unwavering focus inspired everyone around him, including the young pups eager to follow in his paw prints. But it wasn't all about work. James made sure to carve out time for fun, too. He and Max spent weekends exploring nearby trails, splashing through streams, and playing fetch until Max's tongue lolled out in happy exhaustion. Sometimes they'd visit schools or community events, teaching kids about safety and responsibility, while showcasing the incredible bond between humans and animals. Watching Max perform tricks or track scents always drew gasps of amazement from the crowd, followed by thunderous applause. As months turned into years, their partnership only grew stronger. They faced challenges together, storms that knocked out power, late-night calls to assist stranded motorists, even the occasional prankster trying to trip them up, but nothing shook their unity. Max's instincts remained razor-sharp, and James's trust in him never wavered. Together, they continued to protect their town, earning admiration not just locally but across the region. One crisp autumn morning, as they prepared for another day of patrol, James paused to reflect on how far they'd come. Standing there beside Max, he realized something profound. This wasn't just a job, it was a calling. Their story had started with duty and discipline, but it had evolved into something deeper: love, loyalty, and mutual respect. Max may have been trained to serve, but what set him apart was his heart, a heart that chose James as family long ago and never let go. That afternoon, as they drove through familiar streets, James glanced over at Max lounging in the passenger seat, ears perked and eyes scanning the road ahead. "You know, buddy," he said with a grin, "we've done some pretty amazing things together. But I think the best is still yet to come." Max responded with a cheerful bark, thumping his tail against the seat like a drumbeat of agreement. And he was right. The future held endless possibilities, for adventures, for growth, for making an even bigger difference in their corner of the world. What mattered most was that they'd face it side by side, just as they always had. For James, every sunrise brought gratitude for the privilege of working alongside such an extraordinary partner. And for Max, every moment spent with James was proof that home wasn't a place, it was a person. Their journey had taught them, and everyone who witnessed it, that true bonds aren't broken by distance or circumstance. They're forged in trust, tested by adversity, and strengthened by shared triumphs. James and Max weren't just officer and dog. They were symbols of resilience, reminders that even in life's darkest moments, hope could shine through if you had someone willing to stand by your side. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the quiet streets, James parked the car and stepped out, Max trotting happily beside him. Together, they walked toward the glow of dusk, ready to embrace whatever tomorrow might bring. Because no matter what happened next, one thing was certain: James and Max would always find their way back to each other, and to the purpose that united them.